Hey friends, tonight we begin with something strange, if not slightly suspicious. A woman walks into a wedding she clearly wasn't invited to, and calls the groom her husband. But before you enjoy this wild tale, do me a quick favor. Tap that like button and subscribe to the channel, especially if you love stories that make your jaw drop. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe grab a cup of tea or put your phone on Do Not Disturb, because this is one wedding drama you won't forget. Let's begin. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where we explore the fascinating, gritty, and often uncomfortable realities of our shared past. Slowly, softly, and in immersive detail. Tonight we're stepping back over 5,000 years to the dusty riverbanks of the Tigris and Euphrates, where the first great human civilization emerged. Ancient Mesopotamia. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians weren't just inventors of writing, law, and urban living. They also endured daily lives that were anything but glorious. Behind every cuneiform tablet was a scribe with back pain. Behind every ziggurat was a laborer who carried bricks in 110-degree heat. And behind every myth of the gods was a population trying to survive floods, famine, disease, and endless warfare. All without deodorant, clean water, or a concept of weekends. In this 2-hour journey, we'll drift slowly through their world, through the grit of the mud brick streets, into the heart of ancient rituals, and across class lines from slaves to kings. We'll feel the weight of their days, hear the hum of their markets, and explore the buried secrets of their empires. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's real. And it's older than almost anything you've ever touched. So lay back, close your eyes, and get ready to discover why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Mesopotamia, and why that is okay. Let's begin. Imagine it's just before dawn. The light is not golden, not yet. It's blue, cold, faint, and your body wakes before your mind does, pulled out of restless dreams by the distant bleating of goats and the scratch of rats in the thatch. You lie on a mat of woven reeds. It's itchy. It stinks faintly of mildew. You share it with 2 of your children, their feet pressed into your back. There are no pillows, no privacy, no doors, just a piece of woven cloth covering the entrance, flapping slightly in the early breeze. Your joints ache before you even move. You're 27, but you feel 60. Years of labor in the sun have left your shoulders knotted, your knees worn, your back groaning as you roll upright. The first sound of the day is coughing. Your mother's. She hasn't been well. The air is dry, but the dampness of the night still clings to the walls. She clears her throat and begins to grind grain, an old habit done before her body is even fully awake. You step outside to relieve yourself behind the house. The ground is cold. Your feet, calloused and cracked, find the same smooth stepping stones they always do. You smell fish and human waste and warm earth and barley all at once. No one's ever taught you what air should smell like. You only know what it is. You fetch water from the canal. You always glance upstream and wonder what was dumped in before you got here. There's no choice. This is where the water is. You carry it back in a clay jar strapped to your back, with a frayed rope that burns your shoulders when it shifts. When you return, your eldest is already trying to stir the embers from last night's fire. You whisper a small prayer, not to a God who listens, but because it's what your father did, and his father too. Your wife is kneading barley flour. Her hands are cracked. Your children fight over a reed toy. The sun rises slowly and so begins the day. There is no rush, but there is no rest either. Just the rhythm of life, the way it has always been. At midday, the sun becomes your enemy. If you're a field worker, your job is to bend over all day. You guide a wooden plow dragged by oxen, if your family owns any. If not, you're pushing a hoe by hand into dry, stubborn soil. Barley and emmer wheat don't grow themselves. Sweat trickles into your eyes. Dust coats your skin. There's no shade, just heat. Your lips crack. You spit mud. You pray the overseer doesn't find a reason to curse your name today. Lunch is brief. A small, round loaf of barley bread, the texture of stale sponge, dipped into a weak beer made from fermented grains. It's gritty and sour, but it fills you. Barely. The social system says you are free, but only just. Miss your harvest quota, and you're indebted. Oh, too long, and you, or your children, could become slaves. Slavery is common here, not based on race, but debt. You've seen it happen. The temples tax you. The palace taxes you. The gods demand offerings. You do your part and more, yet it never feels like enough. The cigarettes rise higher every year. The nobles grow fatter. You grow lean. Your clothes are rough. A single tunic of coarse wool, dyed brown with crushed plants. You have no sandals. Your feet are hardened from years of walking barefoot across cracked ground and sharp stones. You barely notice the cuts anymore. If you fall ill, you don't see a healer. You visit the temple. If you're lucky, maybe a priest will mix up herbs. Maybe they'll perform a ritual. Or maybe they'll tell you that you've angered a god. Either way, there's no real cure. Your teeth ache. You've had no meat in weeks. Your wife's eyes are sunken from malnutrition. Your youngest has a belly too big for her stick-thin legs. She cries at night, not for toys, but from hunger. And yet, you endure. You laugh. Sometimes, you tell stories of Gilgamesh when the fire burns low. You carve little clay animals for your children. You scratch notes into broken tablets, symbols you barely remember from your childhood lessons. Your joy is brief, but real. A good rain, a kind foreman, a full bowl. These things are enough to bring a smile. When night falls, the wind returns. You gather inside. You light an oil lamp, carefully rationed. One spill and your entire home, made of dried mud and reeds, could go up in flames. You eat dinner slowly. The same barley bread. Maybe a lentil stew if the harvest was good. Maybe some dates if you traded well that day. There is no music, just the soft sounds of chewing, of coughing, of whispers in the dark. You lie down again on your mat. The children curl into you. Your wife hums a song her mother taught her. You close your eyes. You dream of cooler days, of full bellies, of gods that might one day listen. But come morning, the grind begins again. This was the life of a Mesopotamian commoner. No name etched in stone, no statue in your honor, no scrolls of wisdom, just hands in the dirt, eyes on the sky, and hope, always hope, that tomorrow might be better. The rise and rule of Genghis Khan. Let us now pull back from the common people and step into the vast shadow of a single man, Temujin, the one history would remember as Genghis Khan. Born in the rugged steppe of Mongolia sometime around 1162, Temujin was not born into greatness. His early life was shaped by hardship, betrayal, and brutal survival. His father, Yasuge, was a tribal chieftain, but when Temujin was only a child, his father was poisoned by a rival tribe. Overnight, his family lost its protection, wealth, and status. They were abandoned by their clan and left to starve in the wilderness. Imagine being a child in the harsh Mongolian winter, your mother scraping together roots and bones to feed 7 children. Temujin learned from this cold reality that survival was never guaranteed. But he also learned something else. Loyalty was fragile, and power came only through strength and strategy. Temujin's ascent was not swift. It was carved slowly, with blood and broken allegiances. He built alliances with blood brothers like Jamuka, and then broke them when ambition called. He united the fractured Mongol tribes not just by war, but by redefining the meaning of power. Genghis Khan did not rule as a mere warlord. Once he was proclaimed Khan of all Mongols in 1206. He built a new order. Tribal identities were dismantled. Units were reorganized into decimal-based military structures, where loyalty was to him, not to kin. He established a meritocracy long before the word existed. Soldiers were promoted by skill and bravery, not by noble birth. His laws, the Yasa, were severe but consistent, ruthless justice in a lawless world. Now imagine being a young man conscripted into the Mongol army under Genghis Khan. You ride for weeks through freezing winds, carrying a bow and a small leather flask of fermented mare's milk. You obey without question. You share spoils equally. You are part of something bigger, an empire on horseback. But Genghis Khan wasn't just a warrior. He was a thinker. He protected trade routes, established postal systems, and welcomed foreign knowledge. His empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, by far the largest contiguous empire in history. His enemies feared him. Cities that resisted faced complete annihilation. But those who submitted often found tolerance, freedom of religion, exemption from taxation, and protection. His campaigns were brutal. Entire populations vanished. The toll was catastrophic, but in the ashes he built something enduring, systems of governance, commerce, and communication that reshaped the medieval world. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had changed the course of human history. And yet, we don't know exactly where he's buried. His final resting place remains one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. So who was Genghis Khan really? A tyrant, a visionary, a monster, a reformer? Perhaps he was all of these, and perhaps that is why his name still echoes through time, on winds that sweep the steps of his birth, whispering tales of both terror and transformation. Yet his story, at 2,000 words, is far from told. Let us dive deeper now, as the chill wind of the steppes stings our cheeks, and we ride alongside Temujin from forgotten child to world-altering sovereign. The young wolf's hunger for power. In his earliest days of exile, Temujin learned to trust no one fully. His family scavenged through roots, hunted mice, and bartered wild game for meager tools. Even then, he showed signs of leadership, disciplining his younger siblings, resolving disputes, and dreaming of more. His first move toward consolidation came with alliances through marriage. He married Bort from the Ongira tribe, a woman who would remain at his side through raids, kidnappings, and bloodshed. Their bond was not merely romantic, it was political, and Borte's lineage would later bolster his legitimacy. Temujin Abbas' first major betrayal came at the hands of the Taichi, Ud, a clan that captured and enslaved him. Bound and shackled with a wooden collar, he escaped with the help of a sympathetic jailer. This moment marked more than freedom. It etched into his soul the conviction that fear could be weaponized. Jamuka and the Battle of the 13 Wings. Temujin's rise wasn't without challenge. His once blood brother Jamuka stood in his way. Their friendship soured as both men amassed followings. Jamuka represented the aristocratic lineage. Temujin, the future. In 1187, the two clashed at the Battle of Dalan Baljut. Jamuka's forces crushed Temujin's, capturing many. What followed was brutal. 70 young warriors from Temujin's camp were boiled alive as a warning. It was a wound Temujin would never forget, but vengeance, like the steppe, is fast and patient. Unification and the 1206 Kurultai. Over the next 2 decades, Temujin wove together an empire. He conquered rival tribes, not only by warfare, but by offering something new: structure, discipline, and opportunity. He abolished the traditional aristocracy, redistributing power based on merit. Former slaves became generals. The poor became lords. He outlawed the kidnapping of women, once a common steppe practice, and enacted harsh penalties for theft and deceit. When the Kurultai of 1206 declared him Genghis Khan, universal ruler, he stood atop a movement built not solely on war, but on reform, law, and vision, expansion, and blood. The Khwarezmian Empire would be his greatest campaign and his greatest fury. After one of his envoys was killed and others were humiliated, Genghis Khan unleashed a military campaign of fire and death. Cities like Nishapur and Samarkand were obliterated. The Silk Roads were soaked with blood, but they were also cleared of bandits. Trade flourished under Mongol protection. Knowledge moved faster. So did disease. Though the Mongols never intended to spread plague, their global conquests paved its path. Code of the Steppe. The Yasa, his secret code of laws, governed everything from military behavior to civil order. It forbade noble privilege, promoted religious tolerance, and demanded loyalty. It was not written down publicly, but its authority was supreme. Under the Yasa, even the Khan's sons were not above justice. Corruption was punished. Accountability was paramount. The steppes, once ruled by chaos, bowed to an iron spine of law. Death and legacy. Genghis Khan died in 1227. How exactly? We don't know. Some say he fell from his horse. Others whisper darker stories. His body was whisked away by a secret funeral party. Those who buried him were killed, and then those killers were also killed. His tomb has never been found, but what he left behind remains. A dynasty that would go on to rule China, Persia, and Russia. An empire that connected continents. A mythos both feared and revered. His bloodline ruled for generations. His strategies are still taught in military academies. His name, centuries later, still sends a chill down the spine of history. And all of it, every conquest, every reform, every breath of legacy, began in the cold, unforgiving silence of the steppe. Mongol, death, customs, and burial secrets. It begins with silence. In the vast, open steppe of the Mongol Empire, where the wind never rests and the horizon rolls endlessly into itself, death was never loud. There were no grand tombs with golden ceilings for the ordinary Mongol, no carved gravestones with names etched for eternity. Instead, there was ritual, there was secrecy, there was reverence for the soul's quiet departure into the afterlife. Imagine you're standing barefoot in the cold earth. The grass is dry. The morning frost has not yet melted. You wear a deal, a traditional tunic made of heavy wool, tied at the waist with a sash. Around you, a family has gathered. A man has died. A father, a warrior, a herder. His body is wrapped in felt, sewn shut, like a parcel that will never be opened again. There is no wailing. Grief in the Mongol way is quiet, contained. Loud mourning is for nobles, or for children who do not yet understand death's weight. Here, sorrow presses inward. The body is not buried in the village. Mongols believe the dead should not linger among the living. Instead, the dead must be returned to nature, far from where the living eat, sleep, and raise their children. You will ride out far into the open lands, where no one watches. The body must return to the earth without witness, without marker, without disturbance. Only the family and a few chosen riders go. You are one of them. The ride is long. Hours pass. You say little when you arrive at the chosen spot, a hill facing the east where the sun rises. The body is placed in a shallow grave. Stones are piled over it. Not too many, not too few. Enough to guard it from animals, but not enough to attract attention. This is important. Disturbing the dead is dangerous. Spirits can linger. Revenge can follow. And then you ride back in silence. You do not speak the dead man's name for months, maybe years. To name him is to recall him, to draw him back from the next world. The family moves on. The herd is tended. Children are taught. Life continues. But there is more. Among nobles and khans, the death rituals are different. If a great lord dies, especially someone like Genghis Khan or one of his sons, a secret burial is arranged. Historians say the funeral procession might kill every traveler who crosses its path to keep the location hidden. Some say 1,000 horses were ridden over the burial site to flatten the earth and erase all trace. No one knows where Genghis Khan was buried, and that's exactly the point. The death of a Khan is not merely a family loss. It is an event that reshapes the world. It is the loss of a voice that ruled tribes and empires. And yet, even then, the burial is not about monuments. It's about erasure. The idea is to release the soul, not chain it to stone. To die as a Mongol was not the end, but a transition. One spirit traveled on into the sky, to the eternal blue heaven, or Tengri. Offerings of food, drink, and animal fat were burned in fires to nourish the soul on its journey. The camp avoided the site for years. It became sacred, untouchable. There were also shamanic rites. A shaman, often wearing furs, antlers, or a feathered cap, might chant to guide the spirit. He or she would light herbs, wave smoke, call to the winds. The goal was to send the soul on its way without confusion, without regret, without return. Death was not feared, but it was respected. Some customs remain even today. In remote parts of Mongolia, sky burials are still practiced. The body is left exposed to the elements, to the vultures, to the sun, to the wind. It is a return, a recycling, a humbling farewell. And for all their brutality in war, the Mongols had softness in death. They believed in caring for the dead, in letting them go fully, in remembering quietly, because the steppe forgets quickly, but not the soul. You sit in a felt tent after such a burial. The fire crackles, warm against the cold outside. The family gathers, drinking salty milk tea. No one speaks of the dead, but each person feels his presence, the absence that fills the room. The children are taught never to play near graves. The land where bones lie is not a playground. It is sacred. To step there without need is to call misfortune. Some families build ovus, stone cairns, to honor places of spiritual power, but never graves. When winter comes, the snow covers all signs. It is as if the burial never happened. The living move on. The herds must eat. The yurts must be moved. Life, even in grief, cannot pause on the step. In royal families, succession rituals follow death. A new Khan may be chosen at a Kurultai, a political gathering of nobles and clan leaders. These meetings are held in silence about the deceased. The body might still be lying cold, miles away, but power cannot wait. Women in the royal family play a role too. Widows, mothers, and daughters of dead rulers often take on critical roles in securing alliances or holding territory until the next heir comes of age. They are rarely buried with their husbands. Their journeys, both in life and death, are separate. Sometimes, noble burials include horses, weapons, and wealth. These are burned or buried alongside the body, not for vanity, but for use in the afterlife. A great warrior must ride, eat, and fight wherever his soul goes. In time, even these noble graves disappear. Mongol culture does not build pyramids. It builds memory, and if you ever walk the steps and feel the wind grow suddenly still, you might be passing over one. A burial, a moment forgotten by history, but not by the sky. This, too, is Mongol legacy. You are no longer a common herder, not anymore. Imagine you're born not into a yurt crowded with siblings, smoke, and sweat, but into one surrounded by guards, filled with silk and fur, and warmed by prestige. You're the child of a Khan or a Borte, a noblewoman of rank. Your cradle is padded, your milk is served by a nursemaid, and your future is already being discussed among whispering advisors before you can speak. This is life in the royal Mongol family, a life as distant from the toil of a peasant as the stars are from the grass. But don't let the luxury fool you. While commoners fight to survive the cold, royalty must navigate something colder, politics. Let's begin in the early 13th century, in the court of Genghis Khan. The great empire is young but already stretching across vast lands. Here, in the center of this swirling power, the royal family does not live in palaces of stone. No, they live in lavishly decorated chairs, yurts lined with felt, leather, gold embroidery, and silk carpets brought in from China and Persia. These were mobile palaces, always ready to be packed up and moved across the steppe. The Khan himself often slept in a different tent each season, sometimes even each week, to avoid poison or ambush. Paranoia, after all, was part of royalty. Inside the imperial gur, every object has meaning. There is the Khan saddle, not just for riding, but as a symbol of authority. There is the golden cup, from which only he may drink. Bowls of fermented mare's milk sit beside piles of dried meat, bowls of rice, and plates of sweet cakes from distant lands. The Mongols did not produce these delicacies. They conquered them. Guards stand outside in ceremonial leather armor, holding curved swords and long bows. They are not only protection, they are a message. Loyalty is enforced. Every visitor who enters must bow, remove their weapons, and speak only when spoken to. Now, imagine you are one of Genghis Khan's daughters. You are not sent off quietly to be married in some far corner. No, Mongol royal women wield power. Many of Genghis Khan's daughters were married to allied or subordinate Khans, not as trophies, but as governors. Their father trusted them to manage entire cities and regions. Dorogena Khatun, widow of Ogedei Khan, served as regent after his death, ruling the empire for 5 years. She held court, made military decisions, appointed officials, Power was not exclusive to men, yet it was never safe. The royal court was filled with intrigue, whispered betrayal, and constant jockeying for favor. Each wife of the Khan wanted her son to become the next ruler. Each uncle eyed the throne with suspicion. Cousins trained in archery and politics, knowing only one might rise. And then there were the wives. Genghis Khan had multiple wives, as did his sons and grandsons. But only one was the primary wife, the one whose sons were in direct line for succession. Others, while noble, produced sons considered secondary. Still powerful, still dangerous, these women were not idle. They had their own wealth, their own followers, and sometimes even their own military commands. They arranged marriages, managed herds, and hosted envoys. In private, they counseled their husbands. In public, they smiled carefully, watching everything. Let's take a closer look at Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis and ruler of the Yuan dynasty in China. His court was a blend of Mongol steppe tradition and Chinese imperial formality. In the Forbidden City, Kublai presided over feasts, where Mongol throat singers performed beside Chinese opera. His empress, Chabi, was a key advisor, managing internal court conflicts and representing him in diplomatic events. Royal children were raised by tutors and guardians, not by their own parents. They were taught archery, horse riding, court etiquette, and multiple languages. Many grew up not just in tents, but in cities they had conquered: Samarkand, Karakoram, Beijing. But the royal family's greatest concern was not education. It was continuity. The Mongols had no tradition of primogeniture. That meant the eldest son did not automatically inherit the throne. Instead, the next Khan was often chosen by a Kurultai, a council of nobles and military leaders. This system encouraged backroom alliances, bribery, and sometimes civil war. After Genghis Khan's death, his sons fought over who would rule. The empire was eventually divided into 4 major khanates: the Yuan, China; the Ilkhanate, Persia; the Chagatai, Central Asia; and the Golden Horde, Russia. While they remained nominally united, each was ruled by different branches of the royal family, each jealous, watchful, and ambitious. Royal life, then, was a tightrope. You might feast on the finest lamb, drink golden bowls of fermented mare's milk, and wear silk robes stitched with dragons. But at any moment, you might be accused, exiled, or silenced. And yet, the family endured. How? Through strategy. The royal women forged alliances through marriage. The men rewarded loyalty with titles and land. The family built networks across Asia and the Middle East through merchants, monks, and generals. They placed family members as governors, commanders, and spiritual leaders. Their names echoed from Korea to Baghdad. Inside the inner circle, knowledge was everything. You needed to know who was angry, who had lost favor, which general was moving troops, and which wife was speaking too boldly. You needed to appear gracious, generous, but never weak. Even religion was political. Some Khans favored Buddhism, others converted to Islam. Still others supported Nestorian Christianity. Religion offered both personal salvation and a tool to bind subjects. A wise Khan respected shamans but funded monasteries. He listened to astrologers but employed mathematicians. This blend of tradition and adaptation was the secret of Mongol power. In the evenings inside the royal yurts, stories were told of Genghis's conquests, of battles won on snowy fields, of traitors unmasked, and of loyalty, quiet fierce and absolute. Children fell asleep on fur rugs as firelight flickered on golden bowls. Outside, the horses snorted in their pens. The guards whispered. The wind rattled the felt walls. And the empire, for that night, was still. To be royal in the Mongol world was to live with power, but always at the edge of danger. And so, they kept moving. The empire, you'd never survive. And so, you've wandered the wind-lashed steppes, waded through the icy routines of a common herder, sat inside the swirling shadows of a war tent, stood silently beside a sacred grave mound, and peeked inside the silk-lined chambers of Mongol royalty. Now, take a breath, because while it's easy to romanticize the horsemen of the East, their lightning raids, unmatched endurance, and seemingly immortal leaders, what you've seen is something far quieter, far more human. You've seen the aches of waking early on the bare ground, the slow grind of hauling water, and the humiliation of bowing before a foreman just to survive. You've followed Genghis Khan, not just as a conqueror, but as a boy abandoned, a brother betrayed, a man scarred by trauma. You've walked beside mourners who dared not speak a name, whose tears were hidden behind their hands, whose grief disappeared into the soil without monuments. And yes, you've knelt beside silken pillows and golden tents, but you now know the truth. The closer you get to power in the Mongol Empire, the colder the air becomes. Behind every feast is a feud. Behind every heir, a knife in the dark. Would you last a day in this empire? Not without losing something. Not without losing the warmth of modern softness. The mattress, the running water, the safety of obscurity, and the comfort of choice. But maybe, just maybe, the Mongols knew something we've forgotten. That strength is forged in discomfort. That loyalty is more than words. That legacy, though often built on blood, is still remembered in stories whispered across centuries. Let the wind settle now. Let the hooves quiet. Let the night stretch wide and luring. Because whether you were born into a yurt or a palace, whether you carried milk or wielded a sword, in the end, even the Mongols rested. And so should you. Good night.